I've got a Revita tree sticking out of my shoulder, exactly the way I like it as well. We'll kick this thing off. Mr. BenStar, it is good to have you here on this brilliant Saturday morning. How's it going on your end?
Thank you for having me. It's going good. It's going good.
That's good. That's very good. I figured. I mean, look, we're gonna talk about everything at this point.
Oh boy.
I normally, when I do this kind of stuff, I'll like send over some questions of, hey, here's what to expect, here's what I'm going to talk about. I didn't do that at all with you.
That's very concerning.
I'm going to ask you all kinds of, extremely controversial stuff, get you canceled on Twitter.
Good.
But in the process, you know how cancellation goes. It gets your name in the feed. Everybody's going to see Revita. They're going to go check out Revita. Like, it's gonna end up working better for you in the end, but hey, it's fine. But I figured hey, let's start. We'll go nice and easy. We'll just slide right in with a simple question to start before we get into the nitty gritty of game development and life as a game developer. Give me the BenStar classic. You're making a sandwich for lunch. What is the ideal BenStar sandwich?
Oh boy, starting with the really tricky questions apparently. So a typical BenStar sandwich is cheese, ham, lettuce, and tomatoes.
Okay, what kind of cheese?
Now you're trying to get me to pronounce German cheeses in English.
Oh boy.
Emmentaler is what it's called in German. I don't know. It probably sounds something along those lines in English.
Okay. Never heard of it, but I am intrigued
it's
nonetheless.
Cheese with holes.
Okay, it's like a Swiss maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Do you any kind of mustard, barbecue sauce, ketchup if you're a heathen, like any condiment action?
Nah, not on my normal like sandwiches.
Just a dry sandwich, man. Honestly, I respect it. I respect it. Okay, that's a good way to break the ice. Ben, for those for those that don't know about Revita, give me the elevator speech that you give when somebody asks you what game you're making. What is Revita to you?
Sure. Revita is a 2D platformer roguelite, all about taking risks to the extreme. It's all about managing health as your main resource, and climbing a clock tower that is ever changing.
Nice, very nice. I can't think of a better way to describe it. When did you first start development on Revita? And I'm gonna actually like kind of take that one step further. When did the seed of Revita get planted in your head? Is this something that you've thought about for a long time, or was it hey, I have this idea, get running with it?
Revita started originally while I was still in high school. It was originally not even called Revita. It was called Aerodynamic. It was a very different game. I mean, the idea of it being a 2D platformer roguelite was always there, because at the time, which was like 4 to 5 years ago at this point, there weren't really any of those. So I was like, haha, I'm gonna corner the market. See now where we have like a bunch of them. Whoops. But yeah, so it started as like this 2D platformer roguelite where you play as this kid, which looks fairly familiar to how Revita Kid looks nowadays. But you had like a bow and arrow and a slow motion mechanic. So the idea would be you can shoot arrows, you can pull them back, and the idea of like going through room by room, like with like an elevator, was there fairly early on. So you have your room with enemies, so like a wave of enemies. You defeat all of them, you move on to the next room. And from time to time, there are like special rooms and stuff. So that was the first iteration, and through there, At some point, Revita Kid had a sword as like a main weapon. That's also when I started tinkering around with it, making it entirely procedurally generated, which spoiler did not work out. The game was horrible. And then it turned into Revita. So yeah, the idea was kind of there from the beginning, but like all the HP mechanics and that kind of stuff, the stuff that is now basically the pillar mechanic of the game, that actually got added fairly later into development.
Interesting. So, I mean, I what I heard was, core things that came out was, a bow and arrow mechanic, then moving to a sword. What made you land on a gun for the Revita Kid? And then, you kind of see still the bow come into play, the sword come into play with the celestial weapons. Was that kind of a design decision to incorporate some of that, old work from aerodynamic into Revita, or how did that kind of mesh together, these two separate entity games into one?
Well, to be entirely honest, the reason it turned into a gun, probably, if I remember correctly, was just because it's just the easiest and most satisfying way to make a weapon. It's just a simple projectile weapon. And with roguelites, obviously, with the whole focus being on synergies and stuff like that, that's just the easiest thing to build on because it's just a simple projectile that just moves forward and gets destroyed at some point. And so you can build a lot onto that. Where with like a bow and arrow, you automatically have like the sort of gravity thing built in, and also the aerodynamic mechanics. They never felt right. They were interesting and honestly might be something to revisit at some point. But they just never really felt that good to me. And then it turned into a sword because probably at the time I was watching or playing video games that had combat like that. And I was like, ooh, this is fun. Let's make like a kind of like combo system for like a sword. Spoiler, that stuff is very difficult to actually implement and to make feel good. And it also doesn't really vibe well with like the roguelite aspects that I was going for, with the main inspiration being stuff like Isaac. So yeah, that's basically how I settled on the gun. And then the celestial weapons, as they're currently in the game, mostly came from the idea of specifically people early on kind of being like, hey, would it be possible to have more weapon types in the game? And I was always like, doesn't really work because like it limits your synergy potential, and I don't want to do that because obviously that's the main focus of the game. So that's how they turned into like sub weapons, just secondary weapons that you can use every once in a while.
And now you're in a position where you have made secondary weapons
yes.
in the game.
Yes.
So it continues to grow and evolve. I thought that was one of the most fascinating and unexpected updates to the game in the most recent version of Revita, adding those new starting weapons. Was that something that was always kind of in the back of your head as a possibility, or was that one that, as people were kind of giving feedback and ideas, was that something you took from the community instead?
Honestly, like, actually quite the opposite. Like, it was always a thing where I was like, no, I don't really want to do that because I don't really know how to make that work, because then you have to make them interesting and unique, and it just doesn't feel right. Like, especially with other games that do kind of that kind of thing. Like, for example, Hades, you have like very diverse weapons that play nothing alike. And so I was always like, I don't know, like the base gun has like the most synergy potential and there's the most stuff you can do with it. But then people rightfully started saying, well, but it makes the beginning of the game specifically feel very similar usually. And so then very late into the development of the last update, like probably like 3 to 4 weeks till release, I was like, you know what? No. I'm gonna try out some different weapon ideas for the guns. And then it just worked and it felt good, so it happened.
I love it. I think it adds a whole nother kind of layer to Revita that it's like as soon as you unlock it and you go down there, you're like, oh my god, there's a lot more to this game than I even expected like at the time. And I think about as a player of Revita, I came in early on. I was there
Right.
day one launch kind of thing. And to see where the game's gone now, I imagine a player coming in today, brand new to the game, there's so much content and you're not even out of early access yet. Uh, what is it like to kind of be in the game development community, watching your own game grow and not even be at your release yet? Is that stressful to be able to see reviews shift and change based on updates to the game? Revita's gone through a lot of iterations at this point with a
Yeah.
lot of balance changes and things like that.
It's honestly quite terrifying. I mean, just a funny side note. I think literally yesterday, someone tweeted at me on Twitter and was like, "Hey, I finished Revita, really good game," and had to be like, "It's not done yet. There's still content to come. The game is not fully done yet." Which is fascinating to see people go like, "Oh yeah, this game is fully finished." It's like, no, we still got like a big update coming. At the very least for the early access. But yeah, it's terrifying because like especially with early access. Well, if I were to do it again, I would absolutely go with early access because the game now wouldn't be what it is without it. To be perfectly honest, the game would have a lot more issues. I mean, the statue change was a big one that I didn't even think about. That came from the community. And then like a lot of the balancing stuff. I mean, the half-heart damage stuff, the curse system with the cursed enemies dealing double damage and that kind of stuff. That all came from the community. And the game would be a lot worse if it wasn't for that. And like yeah, it's terrifying on the other hand because like especially with like Steam's review system. Um, Basically what your review score is determines how well the game sells. So if you get like a bunch of negative reviews, like specifically at once, and the recent reviews just say like mixed or like even worse, like a bad score, that means nobody's going to buy the game. Like even after it has gone through changes. Luckily, with like the last update specifically, the game has been flourishing quite well. And we got a lot of positive reviews and stuff like that. But yeah, it's like it's always this like basically every day like there just have to be like 2-3 people that leave like a negative review and bam, it stops selling. And that is quite scary, especially for a game that is supposed to still be in development, is supposed to still iterate on and change, and is not in its final form yet.
I always, whenever I think about game development, I try to, equate it to life as a content creator too,
Mm.
because YouTube and Twitch, they have all of the analytics out there. You can see exactly what video is doing well, how people are getting navigated around. Do those kinds of tools exist on Steam to be able to see how your game is selling, or is it, more you're watching reviews and then seeing an impact from there?
Yes, there are definitely tools there. Like for example, you can see like how many units you sold on that day, how many wish lists you've gathered that day, where those sales and wish lists are coming from, like specific countries and stuff like that. Um, like where the page clicks specifically, like who clicks on the Steam page, where are those clicks coming from? Do they come from external websites? Like for example, if someone really big made like a video on the game, like then you usually see like a big shift, or if there's like a review or any kind of like external influence on the sales, you can see that kind of stuff. So the tools given are actually, at least from my perspective, which to be fair, it all has to be put in the perspective. This being kind of like my first commercial game in that sense, but from my perspective, they're quite solid.
Interesting. Have you I don't know if this is one that I should ask, but all bets are off on this one.
Sure,
Um,
ask that.
when did you receive the most buys, wish lists, etc. for Revita during the course of its you know, progression
But
through early access? And was it related to a content creator giving it a boost by making a video? Was it, an article that spurred it? Was it just the launch of early access?
The most definitely came from the launch of the early access. I think that's roughly like once, like to not go too much into detail, but I think it's like roughly like 4/6 to 5/6 of all the sales so far have all been from the early access launch. To be fair, I have to also add that Revita, sales potential wise, I see the big sales coming from the 1.0 launch, especially since a lot of people got, to be quite honest, got probably burnt with the original early access release, because the game did have its issues, and a lot of people also generally with early access, from what I've seen at the very least, when the early access game releases on its first iteration, they buy the game, see what it's like, and then they refund it. And then potentially they buy it again in like a later stage when like the game is more developed, just to see like what the game is like. So most sales have definitely been from the launch, and to be quite honest, like just seeing like sales throughout the journey so far, at the very least, I do have to say like most sales probably come from content creators. Like whenever there's like, especially when you have like new content creators who like have like an entirely new community of people who've never seen the game. Like I remember, for example, when Huts was playing the game, for the first time, and he uploaded that video, that gave like a huge boost, because that community has never heard of that game. And so specifically with my personal philosophy, specifically with Roguelites, is that usually the best marketing in that regard are content creators, because that's usually where those games really work. They usually work very well with commentary. You can play those games technically endlessly. So Twitch, YouTube, etc. That's usually where you see most of that. But again, that's just personal experience, and who knows what that looks like with other games and stuff like that.
So you kind of talk about roguelites being a big thing in the industry right now, and obviously, as a content creator who focuses on roguelites most of the time, I'm like, keep on giving me more. The more roguelites you have, my career continues doing YouTube. Do you think the genre is getting a bit overdone? Do you think that it's becoming too saturated, or is there even any other genre in games that you think is oversaturated? And then, do you have a controversial opinion of what genre of game you want more of instead?
I mean, as I personally am mostly a roguelite player, I too would agree that yes, the roguelite genre is oversaturated, just in general speaking terms. But personally speaking, like when it comes to like quality roguelites, and I know I have some very very hot takes when it comes to popular roguelites, because I'm a roguelite game designer, so obviously that's where I usually have the most criticism and stuff like that. But that is the genre that I like to see more of, especially more quality games. Well, because there is a lot of games, but there's also a lot of games that are not that great, to be quite frank. And I mean, there's a lot of innovation there too. I mean, one example being like the recently released Shovel Knight spin-off, which that is a roguelite, and that's like also a puzzle game, and I've never seen a roguelite like that. So there's certainly like a lot more innovation to be done. I mean, yes, it is starting to oversaturate in certain types of roguelites. I mean, we had like a big boost in platformer roguelites to not to my liking, to be perfectly fair, obviously.
Yeah. When you thought you were cornering the market, and then
Yep.
You get Dungreed, Neon Abyss, all Dead
which,
Cells.
To be fair, they all do different stuff. But we had like in the same year, pretty much. We had I don't know if Dungreed was the same year or if that was the end of the year before, but we had Neon Abyss, we had Scorchbringer. I'm sure there were quite a few others. And like obviously, there's like on one hand, it's like you see these games do really well, and you're like, well, there apparently are people who like these kind of games, but on the other hand, obviously, it's also like, dang it, could have been us there.
It's competition.
But yeah, it is how it is. But at the end of the day, that is definitely the genre I would still like to see more games of, because those are the games I play. I don't actually play a lot of games because, I mean, I work in games. So when I do end up playing games, it's usually in short bursts, and I mean, for that, roguelites are perfect.
So you're definitely around, other roguelites in the industry. Are you ever able to draw inspiration from some of these other games? You spoke about Isaac being an inspiration for
Yeah.
Revita. It's clear you can see a little bit of Hollow Knight in Revita. Are there any other games that were kind of major inspirations for Revita? And when new games come out, are there little things that you see where you're like, hey, that's something that, in 1.3, I think could be a good time to pull that idea in.
I mean, I think a lot, honestly. Like, I'm sure like when I design games, I take like a lot of inspiration from the games that I'm playing. So I'm sure there's like inspiration from Isaac, of course. I mean, that's the obvious one with the way items are handled. You have the Enter the Gungeon. There's some influence there with like some design elements. There's some Dead Cells influence there. Um, there probably also some Scorchbringer influence there. There's like basically everything I've played, I draw some inspiration from. Like, even like, to be quite honest, I think the synergy system as it now is in the game, probably drew a lot of inspiration from Neon Abyss, and how they handle like item sets, and also like other um auto battler games where they have like similar kind of like item set systems. It works a little bit different, obviously, but yeah, it's I draw inspiration from a lot of games in that regard.
So looking forward to the 1.0 release.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that I'll occasionally I'll go into the Revita Discord and I'll scan the feedback channel, and I'll hit thumbs up on things where I'm like, yeah, that sounds sick. What is there anything that you have found from the community that they're going, hey, I want this? If you could add one singular thing to Revita with snap of your fingers and it's there, no work, no time going, what would be that addition?
Modding support, probably. That's honestly the thing the community asks for the most frequent when it just comes to new features and that kind of stuff. I mean, there's feedback for existing stuff and changing up existing stuff. I think one of the things that people have brought up quite a few times is like making it so like the sub weapons are like upgradable and that kind of stuff. Which those are like more smaller quote unquote additions. I mean, they still affect the overall gameplay and neat design and that kind of stuff. But like just bigger features, I think the most frequently requested one is probably modding support, which I would love to do, but it is sadly like it's just a thing that's like it's very expensive to do. You need a community for it, which, while the Revita community is great and it's growing, it's not there yet for modding community, because the people usually asking for modding support want to play mods, not necessarily make them. And you need people who make mods, otherwise, you can't play them. So that's the tricky point with modding support.
So, speaking from someone who knows quite literally nothing about modding support for games, I've dabbled with making a Minecraft mod kind of thing. What is it about modding support that makes it expensive to make and makes it time consuming to make? What is kind of the process that goes into developing, an API of sorts?
Well, the main issue, or the main crux of the situation is kind of like, did you develop the game going into with the idea of wanting to add modding support, or is that something that you thought of later? Because in the case of Revita was not developed with modding support in mind, because Revita was kind of also my learning experience with programming. When I started Revita, I didn't know much about programming. So the systems or the base systems were never set up for modding support. And obviously, like as the game progressed, there's a lot of systems obviously that got entirely reworked to be more up to standards in regards to the programming side of things. But the system and the design was never designed with modding support in mind. So if we want to add modding support now, that would require going back into these systems, rewriting them so to make it possible that you can have kind of like outside input. So you have like files that you can give the game that then reads like, oh, this is like, for example, an item and this does this and this and this. It needs to play that code here and here and these specific points, which then interact with other things. That's just a lot of system rework in the back end, and that's mostly where that cost and time comes from.
Gotcha. And you talk about, I mean, I just heard you say that Revita was kind of your way of learning programming. Are you self-taught when it comes to game development, game design, programming? Did you have any schooling or anything for learning this stuff?
Yeah, I'm entirely self-taught when it comes to game design. I started game design stuff when I was in high school, towards the end of it, in the higher grades. And then I shortly did an apprenticeship to become a graphic designer, which then didn't work out because the whole game development side of things took over too much. And I then decided, well, I could go with like the risky job decision of a graphic designer, or could go the other risky decision, which is the one that I already spend most of my time on. So just gotta go with that. So yeah, it's entirely self-taught. Everything that you see in Revita that was done by me. So the programming, the design, and some of the assets that was all self-taught.
That's insane. I definitely did not know that. That is, I mean, that's absurd. I can't even imagine. I have some background in kind of programming and stuff like that. I can't imagine learning enough to make a masterpiece like Revita, being able to do that from just messing around with it. Like that's insane. Major props to you.
I mean, in that sense, you kind of also have to keep in mind that while Revita obviously is the first really big scale commercial project, it's not the only thing I've ever worked on, right? So like I've done a bunch of like game jams and stuff. I've dabbled in a lot of prototypes that never made it anywhere. So Revita, while being the first commercial game, it's not the first project. Gotcha. So there's a lot of like learning in between. Then with the different iterations of Revita, those all had space in between where I was working on other stuff too, until I settled on Revita. So yeah, there's it's still a big span, and I mean I started, I think when I was like 14, I started dabbling with like Game Maker and stuff. So at the end of the day, it's still a fairly big time span.
It's crazy. You bring up game jams. Something that as a content creator, I've always loved the idea of game jams because it's a way to, I think prototypes was a great way to kind of describe that. Because a lot of these game jam games end up turning into something much greater as time goes on. Of the kind of game jams that you've been a part of, was there anything where you looked at it at the end and you went, let's put this in a secure file on my computer and maybe come back to this sometime in the future? Was there an idea you had where you went, this could be a really good one?
I mean, at the time of making them, for sure. Like after you're done with that game, you're like, but I could expand this more and more. Now looking back, there's a lot of stuff I'm like, maybe that was a good idea to not expand on that. And there was like one example which I think is funny. One of the game jams I made like a auto battler game, but that was way before that genre blew up. So now looking back, I'm like, wrong timing on that one. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, this there's some neat elements in there that could be expanded upon. But for the most part, none of these games really feel in a position where it'd be like, oh, these could be expanded to like full-on big games.
Gotcha. Okay, let's shift focus a little bit. We're still gonna stay near and dear to Revita in your game development kind of career that you're creating. Let's talk some of the negative sides of game development.
Yes.
Especially with the way that early access works. You have these partial update releases that kind of add on to early access. And following you on Twitter during the time of these releases, there's always kind of a crunch that goes on at the end of these updates and deadlines. How do you manage kind of the stress of dealing with those deadlines? And do you ever get just straight burnout from working on Revita?
I am in the lucky position where I somehow, for some reason, have suffered no burnout so far and throughout the entire development of this game. I don't know how and why, but I'm glad. Obviously,
we are too.
But yeah, it's difficult. Because the way this kind of works, to give a little bit more of a look on the back end that you usually don't see. A lot of this stuff is settled very early into development, so we have like a development plan. We know like, okay, this is where these updates are supposed to come out. We have this much time in between to fill them with content, that kind of stuff. My problem usually is that I'm a disgusting perfectionist when it comes to this stuff. So when I make an update, I have an original plan which would fit in that time schedule. But then I keep adding new stuff into it because I'm like, oh, this is something the community really wants and they want it now. So I need to deliver on this now. It will make the game better. And obviously, if the game is better, then that also leads to more sales, more positive feedback. The general media loop focuses more on the game, etc., etc. So what it ends up being is just that the updates start with like a fairly basic idea, and then they scale up more and more and more. Especially with like the last update, for example, which, to be fair, that one went a little better than the ones prior. Like especially the one that added the dailies and the water area. That was probably the roughest update because I literally was working on adding the boss like 3 days before release. And that's rough. And I mean, we had to, for that one, we even added like stuff post-launch with a patch, like the remaining hats that were planned and some remaining enemies that didn't make the cut and that kind of stuff. Because at the end of the day, I still want the update to be what it was supposed to be. And so it's tricky. And it mostly just comes down to me being not great at planning, because this is kind of like the first project, and that brings with it the issue of me being like, hey, I have rough estimates how long this is going to take, but I don't know for sure. And usually with that kind of stuff, you overestimate yourself, and at the end of the day, you need way more time than you originally planned to put something in comfortably. So yeah, that's kind of like the issue with Revita updates.
And I feel like the other thing to note is like you add another 20, 30 relics every update to the game. Do you ever get writer's block on ideas for relics? Do you have like a master spreadsheet that's like, every time something comes into your brain for a relic, you write it down, and then that joins the pool of relics that you may create?
So yes, I have like a massive document that's called the relic dictionary. Where basically whenever I have an idea or someone brings up an idea where I'm like, oh, this could be neat, or I see something in another game where I'm like, oh, I can kind of put a spin on that. I add them to the list, and then when I need them, which is like towards the end of an update usually, because small frame of reference, item adding is probably the quickest part of any update. Like I think for the adding like all what was it, 45 relics last update, I think.
Insane.
That was like done in like 2 to 3 days because the design was already done. So it's mostly just making the sprites and then just implementing them.
That's crazy.
So yeah, I basically just collect item ideas throughout the development cycle, and then at the end I just put them in. And if I need more ideas, then I brainstorm and stuff.
Is there a specific, spot that you go to think up relic ideas? Is this in the shower in the morning and then it comes to mind? Oh, the loofah item. This is a good one. Like,
I mean, honestly, yeah. That's kind of like the funny thing with game development. Like the best ideas come when you either go to bed and then you forget them the next day, or you're in the shower where you forget them after you're out of the shower. But yeah, usually that, or for example, while watching videos of other roguelites, I'm like, oh, this could be an interesting item that we in that way like is like kind of like a type of item that we don't really have, and that could work really well in Revita. So then I write it down, and then I kind of like redesign it to make it work in Revita. That kind of stuff.
Interesting. So here's the heavy hitter, and hopefully the answer is just a straightforward and happy response. Do you ever regret kind of going down this game development path and kind of focusing on something like Revita?
Not really. I think that kind of stuff needs to be divided into like 2 segments, because like the development aspect I absolutely love, and I mean, just gonna say like, if the resources were there, like I would keep working on Revita till like I literally run out of ideas. Because it's a passion project. It's very dear to me. I have like an emotional attachment to it because like it literally connects to a lot of stuff in my life at this point. A lot of people I've met through working on Revita and that kind of stuff. I'm here where I am right now because of Revita. So it's that kind of stuff like I love doing. But then you do have the business side of things, and there's a lot of anxiety and panic attacks attached to that, where it's like, well, the game still needs to sell, and with the game development market being so confusing, to put it lightly, like you don't really know what's gonna sell when. You're kind of like very much dependent on luck in a sense, right? Because like someone's like some big content creator could pick the game up tomorrow and absolutely fall in love with it, produce like a bajillion episodes on it, and the fan base is like, oh, this is great, and then suddenly game blows up. Or that doesn't happen, and the game never sees the day of light. And you don't have control over that, like at all. Like you can have like the best game ever made, and nobody sees it. And that is very difficult. Like I mean, even now, right now, like I look at the like other people's game releases and stuff like that. I'm like, well, if you see it in that relative situation, then Revita's doing fairly good. But at the end of the day, Revita's not doing good enough. It's still at a spot where I'm like, I don't know if this game is going to be financially viable to, for example, keep working on it. Because like to again bring back like open up the curtain a little bit. Revita has a publisher behind it. They have a lot of investment in the game financially, and obviously they want to see their money back at some point too. And that way, this kind of stuff becomes tricky because at that point, Revita is not just an indie project anymore. It's like this big scale indie project. And so this kind of stuff becomes really really scary. And then there are nights where I stay up and I'm like, I don't know if this game is gonna lead anywhere, because like there's a lot of stuff that I really want to do with the game. Like I think, like, and again, this is not promising anything. This is just saying what it is. But like I have a design document where I technically have like like rough ideas for like 3 more areas, that kind of stuff. I'm like, I do want to keep working on this game. There's a lot of stuff I still want to do with it. Like, there's a lot of elements that, just because of the nature of early access and time windows and budgets, never going to make it into 1.0 that originally were planned for it. For example, like one example was like a Twitch mode that was planned at some point for, I think that was the Curious Choices update, and then never made it in, and then just get pushed back and back and back because it didn't fit into the other schedules either. So that's kind of stuff that's not like high priority, but it's stuff that I would like to do. But obviously, that needs time and resources.
So let's talk time and resources then. I know you say that, if you had unlimited time and resources, funds, you would continue working on Revita until you ran out of ideas. Is there something in your head as a type of game that if you had unlimited time and resources that you would focus on creating? I know that you've talked a little bit on Twitter about kind of the idea of a Paper Mario style RPG game.
Yes.
Is that kind of the dream? What is the dream game?
Yeah, I think that would honestly be it, like a Paper Mario styled RPG, but with RPGs. With how long they usually take to play as well. Those are like giant projects that cost a ton of money because they have to have so much writing. You need to have so much content for them, so many assets, because like you need to have this big world with like these different areas and these different enemies, and then like just the battle system and that kind of stuff is like super complex to program. And those projects are just ginormous, and like I mean I before I worked on Revita full time, I was working on a Paper Mario fan game, and that's where I also noticed I was like, this is cool in concept, but like this is never going to be done because like I don't have the resources to, hire the people necessary and pay for myself to work on that. And so yeah, that's definitely the kind of thing that if I was able to, I would absolutely love to be working on.
I for one would love to see the BenStar RPG, Paper Mario style RPG. It just sounds absolutely incredible. I want to touch on a little bit weirder of a topic.
Sure.
Still, we're still staying, tangential to Revita right now. We'll get into the even weirder stuff here in a little bit. I mean, you know me. You know I'm gonna ask some weird questions.
I mean, you gotta.
It's just it is what it is. What is it like as the developer watching a content creator play Revita? Because here's a little weird unknown thing about me. When I was younger, I actually created a Minecraft mod pack that had like a map associated with it. And I'd submitted it for like this weird Feed the Beast competition thing. And some big Minecraft content creator at the time had picked it up and was streaming it on Twitch. And I remember that like my eyes were just, as soon as I saw the notification that he was live, it's like my eyes were glued to the screen. It was like, I have to watch every little second of this, because if he finds like a little bug, there's a period in the wrong place. Like I need to make sure that everything is perfect. Is there kind of a, obsession that you go through with watching people play your game? Is it stressful? Is it exciting? What's kind of the emotions that roll through you during that?
It's kind of both, I think. I mean, it very much depends on the type of content creator. Like for example, with especially like new content creators that I don't usually watch, it's more of like a stressful kind of scary thing because they don't know me, right? They've never talked to me. They experience this game blindly. So there's like no guidance I can give in that regard. Like if they stumble upon like anything and have like issues with something, then there's nothing I can do about that. And maybe they're gonna get upset about the game and they're not gonna like the game and that kind of stuff. And that's very scary. So usually, like there's a lot of like usually the type of content creators I watch play Revita, usually either people I know. So I'm like, yeah, I'm comfortable watching this. This is fun. And I know when they like find an issue, they're not gonna like be like, oh no, this game is now horrible. How dare you? but when it comes to like content creators that I don't know, like I'm usually like a little bit hesitant. Because while I should watch them, obviously, because like if they have issues, they're probably valid problems that need to be addressed. But it's also like this game is so like I'm so emotionally attached to this game that I'm like, when people start criticizing it like very harshly, just because it is how it is, like I obviously also get like a little bit like personally miffed because I'm like, that makes me upset. So yeah, I mean, as an example, like whenever you or Rido or any of the other peeps that watch on YouTube and Twitch, when you like upload a video, I'm like, heck yeah, let's go. So yeah,
It's interesting. It's very interesting. It's the fear of the unknown, I guess.
Yeah.
Sometimes with that.
It definitely is.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk your favorites when it comes to Revita. You know, you've now built a game that, you know, people are falling in love with the NPCs, you know, people are starting to have certain rankings for items, you know, the dislike for bomb grub is becoming a meme in patch notes and within the community. Give me your favorite item. Give me your favorite area in the game so far, and then also who your favorite NPC is.
Oh, this is tough.
Forcing you to choose a baby out of all of them.
I mean, honestly, when it comes to relics, I mean, you gotta go with weights. I mean, at this point, it's a meme. It's a meme that I love. That relic, I think it just generally is a very fun relic. It probably like weights and moon earring probably lead to the funkiest synergies in the game. So you gotta go with that. For area, it's probably the water area simply because I think to this point that's still probably the prettiest area in the entire game.
I agree.
And as I am very visually focused when it comes to design, that's just the one like I tend to. Well, for example, this was not a question, but I'm going to answer it anyway. My least favorite area is probably the sewer area still, because while it looks pretty, it's probably my least favorite visually. And if I had the time to polish it up some more, I probably would. But it's also fine, so you know. I like all the areas, but there's obviously some that I like more and some that I like less. When it comes to NPCs, I think that's where it gets a little tricky. I think my favorite NPCs is probably even one that hasn't been shown yet. It's not in the game yet. But who knows? Who knows?
Wow, gonna leave us with the teaser.
But like from the ones that are in the game, probably the knight. The hero is very fun. It's a very fun character with his like over the top narcissistic nature. That's the fun one.
I always, whenever he talks, all I can picture is Gilderoy Lockhart from Harry Potter for some reason. He just has that kind of flamboyant, over the top personality.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
Good. It's good. So you talk about kind of design being at the forefront of Revita development. And I feel like one of the things that I notice while playing Revita that makes it kind of stand out from other roguelites in the same vein is the lighting in Revita. It's incredible. You know, it looks phenomenal and it's just beautiful.
Thank you.
How do you get the lighting to work like that? What kind of process goes into making that part of the design?
I mean, the funny thing about us is just it's all fake. It's like all the lighting is fake. There's no real lighting in the game. It's all just fake to like every extent of the imagination. But it looks real enough to work. Like basically the lighting is kind of like divided into like 3 segments. We have like the main lighting, which is just like the glowy spots in the game, basically. Then we have the rim lighting, which is like when the outline of the characters glows. And then we have like the shadows. And all of that, like all of those elements are faked. There's no. You don't really have, because it's a 2D game. You don't really have like proper light maps and that kind of stuff. But with like the rim lighting specifically, it adds like this very. It makes it feel a lot more real than it actually is, if that makes sense. Because it feels like the characters respond to the lighting, and it gives the entire game this very like cozy kind of feeling.
Yeah, I mean, cozy is a great way to word it, because I do think that the game has a cozy vibe to it, and it's a strange, delicate balance almost that you go through, because it's a game that is, for a lot of people, brutally difficult. Not for
Yeah.
me, since I'm a master at the video
Of
game.
course, the Revita master.
The Revita master, as we all know. But it's this game that is so ridiculously hard. But then you look at the visuals of it, and it's this, beautiful game with incredible music that you guys have gotten for it. And the pixel art is super clean and nice. You look at a game like Isaac, and the design is obviously, more brutal, right? It's this horror game of sorts.
Yeah.
And then the game is really hard, and it makes sense. Nuclear Throne kind of has the same vibe to it. Enter the Gungeon even has the same vibe to it. But Revita, there's this focus on how pretty the game is. And then you go into it, and it's brutally hard. Do you think that impacts people's decisions, like on opinions of how they like the game? When they think that it's going to be more of a, wholesome, happy game, and then there's a lot of these dark undertones in the game paired with then the beautiful art.
I think that's hard to say, like, especially when it comes to like just specifically the difficulty stuff. It's honestly really tricky as a designer to look at this kind of like fairly, if that makes sense, because like at this point, like the spectrum of people who say this game is the easiest game ever made, and people who say like I can't make it past the first area, there's like such a spectrum. I'm like I don't know. I think the game feels good now, and the game is fine difficulty wise, even for newcomers. But like I don't know. Like the spectrum, there's like so many different aspects to it now. Well, that gets really hard. But on the side of like the visuals being very cutesy, while the game has like more dark undertones, and I mean I think that specifically gets quite obvious with the new content that was added this update. With specifically the ending of it. That is very much intentional, because I personally I'm someone who really likes this idea of like cutesy art style with like very very dark undertones, because it gives everything this very kind of interesting contrast, where it's like you go in with the expectations like, oh, this is a really cute game, and then it turns out it's like, oh, this is actually really dark if you look at it for more than like a few minutes. And yeah, I think that's just like a very interesting kind of visual theme. And I mean, I would probably attribute that to like kind of because I'm a big Kirby fan, and Kirby is very much like the Kirby games do that kind of stuff very well, where you have like this very happy-go-lucky children's game, and then at the end of the game, it's like some weird hellspawn that bleeds out of its eyes, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. I see how it is. And I think that's just a very cool contrast.
Yeah. So you bring up Kirby as one of your favorite games. Unfortunately, I would not consider Kirby to be an indie game in any manner.
Oh, okay.
As you're in the indie game genre, hit me with your favorite indie game of all time. And I know how difficult this question is, because I definitely wouldn't have an answer if asked to me. So I'll ask it to you instead.
Honestly, it's probably not that hard. Like, if I had to pick, it would probably be Hollow Knight.
Okay.
That just blew me away so much when I played it. That was like no other game came close to it. I think the other one that kind of got close to it was Omori, which came out last year, I think. With COVID, it's tricky to keep track of time. But either last year or early this year. I think it might have been early this year. That also just blew me away with like how deep it went, and like the story and characters and stuff. So it's either one of those two.
I feel like I I'm not surprised by the Hollow Knight answer, since it is such a good game, and it's clear to see some influence from it in
Yeah.
Revita. I feel like, oddly enough, even though the healing system is kind of the same kind of vibe, where I see Hollow Knight in Revita is in the character design.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have the main character, Revita Kid, is kind of the same as how the knight is in Hollow Knight, where it's kind of a quiet character that kind of goes about his thing, and then it's all of the people around that are bringing in the personality into the game. Is that something you can speak to as that being an influence? And is there ever a time where you want to make the Revita Kid open up with more of a personality in the game than kind of that quiet nature that he has right now?
I would probably. I don't know if I would attribute that directly to Hollow Knight, like that kind of style. I would definitely say the atmosphere of the entire game, that is definitely heavily inspired by Hollow Knight. This like very moodiness, mostly through colors and lighting. That kind of stuff was heavily inspired by Hollow Knight. The character design I would probably more attribute to kind of like Ghibli-esque designs, like very over exaggerated. And I mean, obviously the design itself. Well, funnily enough, Revita shares like the whole like mask theme with Hollow Knight. That was not intentional in that way. It's more like that. It has a purpose. It has like a symbolic purpose in Revita, and that's just where that fit really well. But yeah, when it comes to the Revita Kid opening up, I think I don't want to say too much on that because the game isn't fully out yet.
Okay.
And there might still be some things left to discover.
Okay. I can respect that. I can respect that. I won't. I was gonna do the whole spoil an upcoming relic type thing. I'm not gonna make you spoil anything. I feel like the 1.0 release, we're all sitting with bated breath, waiting to see what you do next. You've been teasing that it's going to be as bigger than this previous update, which in my opinion, it completely changed the game. I mean, it's not even close to the same game as what it was before that update. So definitely excited to see what comes next in 1.0. Is there anything that you can say about the 1.0 release that will not get you burned at the stake by the publisher? Any little teasers of what we can expect?
I mean, I probably can say that one thing that's very clear, I think, is if you like Revita as it is right now, if you like the elements in it, then you can probably expect a lot more of that in the full release, which I think that's probably the obvious answer. But I can say that the focus for 1.0 specifically is on fleshing out systems that already exist in the game. It's less about adding new things, because as the game stands right now, I'm very happy with the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about, okay, we have all these systems now. Let's go to the extreme. Let's push those systems as far as we can.
And I love that. I love that because I mean, I even said the other day, I responded on Twitter to you. You're out of space in the metro. Like, there's no more room. I don't know where you can add more stuff to the game. So I love the idea of kind of expanding upon what you've already put in and just fleshing it out, making it better. I love it. I really do. My opinion doesn't matter, but I love it.
I mean, honestly, to give a little bit more of like a tease for potential future content. One of the reasons the basement area of the hub is so big was specifically because I was like, we're kind of running out of space here. And in case we ever want to add like more stuff to the hub area, we need more space. And then obviously the whole weapon room kind of stuff. We need a space for that. So when Chip, our lead artist, and we sat together and we're like, okay, we need this area for the new weapons. I said, okay, we need we need this big room, so just in case that if we add more stuff future down the line, we can just add it in there, because we can't just add another floor to the hub area, because at this point it's starting to get a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, the subway keeps going, down, 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 all the way to, bedrock. No, it's crazy kind of having to plan ahead so far in advance when you don't even know if some of the ideas are gonna, come to be in the game in the future.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest issue with like early access is the planning ahead of stuff, because like there's a lot of stuff where you're like, okay, I need to add this now, but I don't know where this will actually go in the future.
Yeah.
Which then becomes like really tricky, because you kind of have to speculate. Okay, if we add more, then we need like the space or that kind of stuff. Which, to be fair, is at least fairly doable with roguelites, because like most of the new content is like more relics, which is like, well, that's easy. It's just like another thing in another spot in the menu. But specifically when it comes to like NPCs in the hub area, that's the kind of stuff where it gets really tricky to plan ahead, because like most of the NPCs that are currently in the game were not planned from the get-go.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy. Okay, Ben. Well, we're at the hour, and I don't want to hold you too long today, but I am going to kind of speed round a couple of questions to you. Some weird ones, get you trending on Twitter here.
Let's go.
You can live anywhere in the world than where you currently are right now. Do you stay exactly where you are, or is there a location that you would move to in a heartbeat?
If without any context, if the question is asked without any context, so like without like any work requirements or that kind of stuff, I'd probably stay.
Okay. That's all we get, huh? You just...
Yep. I mean, you wanted to speedrun questions.
Okay, I mean, I
can go into more detail, but
I'm in on the speedrun. Okay, cereal with milk. Is it a soup?
Probably.
Okay.
Yes.
Have you ever eaten or drank anything in the shower, and have you heard of a shower orange, and would you try it?
No, and I'm just a little bit disturbed by that sentence. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, that's fair. And final question: hot dog is a sandwich? Yes or no?
No, it's not. If anything, it's a taco.
I'm in. I'm in. All right, Ben. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day for a little interview. This was an absolute blast. I'm hoping
it's been really fun.
Sometime 1.0 release. Let's get another little interview in, so all of the things that you had to redact in your brain as you were thinking about them, you can talk about.
Yes.
Incredible. All right, man. Thank you so much, and we'll.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah, and have a good day, Chad, and you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.